of the Zoom. So I imagine there it is. Yep.
I have clicked the button and it says recording. It also says your network bandwidth is low. So we'll find out what that does. But we'll see what, yeah, because that'd be cool if we can upload that. Because if you go on the website, the SEC website, I made a page where I've been uploading just the like Google Docs notes from the past several sessions, including I threw up some notes for today as well. It's under the high school tab if anybody was interested in looking at that. But this would certainly be cool as well because then you get everything, not just the notes. Interesting. Network bandwidth is low, and it looks like my video is frozen, or Dan's video is frozen at least, which would imply that Zoom is a little sketchy. So we'll find out. I understand a lot of people are using Zoom currently.
It just kind of always says my network bandwidth is low.
It's also somehow always got your video up.
It's not on right now, so I don't know what you're looking at.
Did I miss anything?
Hi, Steven. You have just missed the normal pleasantries and figuring out that we can record Zoom.
Oh,
so
nice.
Maybe we'll be able to see Zoom recordings up somewhere.
That's pretty neat.
It is. I hope. We'll find out. All right. Anyway, we are, I guess, we've generally been given about 5 minutes for people to hop in and occasionally see a few more after that, but we are at 3:05. We got 12 people in here. I guess that counts me. And may as well go ahead with things. So what I had today, let me find my tab.
Boy.
I just clicked the wrong thing. Here we go. All right, so today I was reading another sailing book, and I'm not reading out of the book today. I don't want to do too many of the same thing too many times in a row. But I was reading this book. It's Gary Jobson's Championship Fit Sailing. I found it in the SCC trailer once when I was cleaning things up. I don't know where it came from, but kind of an interesting book.
Came from the SCC trailer.
It just was there. But anyway, so I'm reading through this book, and I find it interesting. There aren't that many books or resources that are specifically talking about dinghy sailing, if you've ever noticed. Most of the time it's like books about sailing, and most of the stuff is relatable to big boats and little boats, all sizes, but you'll see things largely talking more to keelboats where you have, 10 people on a boat, and how do you know when to change your head sail, how to change your jib, because keelboats have like 4 different jib sizes and stuff. It's like, that's not relevant at all to me on a dinghy. But the general tactics and stuff still apply. So anyway, I was in the back of the book, he kind of summarizes everything he's been talking about. And he's got this whole, his tips for championship sailing, by which he means not for sailing in a championship regatta, but how to sail to a championship level. And a lot of it is like keelboat specific. He's talking about, setting your spinnaker and how to do it the best way and that sort of thing. But I went through and kind of pulled out what is relevant to dinghies. Let me see if, no, I won't bother with that. Anyway, so I kind of broke it down in, we've got 4 little categories here. So we've got some tips about sail trim. We've got some boat handling tips. We've got some strategy considerations and some tactics considerations. Who can tell me the difference between strategy and tactics? It's real quiet there. Oh, Dan's hand is raised. Dan, would you like to answer the question?
This is a toughie, and I always forget it. But if I were to take a shot, strategy relates only to your boat, and tactics relates only how you relate to other boats.
Yeah, that's a way to put it. I think another way you could explain it would be strategy is the course and tactics is the competitors. So strategy is like you're looking at the race course and there's whatever better breeze on the left side or more current on the right or whatever sort of your race plan is going to be. Going into the race, I think this is what I want to do, and then tactics are things that happen during when this is what I want to do, but there's a boat here, and so I can't do that, so I'm going to have to figure out something else. So I think that's probably the basic cut between those. But yeah, so strategy is course, tactics is competitors. You can think of it that way. All right, so we will start with some. Well, since we're talking about that, may as well start with some strategy stuff. So just a couple things here. One is he says you want to kind of make sure that, and this is one of the things that was more relevant to the bigger boats where you have more people on board. But he's saying make sure that every member of the crew knows their specific role, and make sure that every specific role that needs to be filled is assigned to somebody. And so for us in dinghies, there's 2 people in the boat, which means that both of those people have multiple roles to do. So the skipper is steering, so they're the helmsman, if you want to take all the bigger boat terms, and then they're also the mainsail trimmer, and one or the other of you 2 is going to be the tactician, taking all the information and making the decisions on what needs to happen. And the crew in our dinghy is the jib trimmer. They're the rail meat, if you will, the people who are doing all the hiking, right? And then they've also got they're the spotter looking around for everything, for other boats and stuff. So definitely figuring out, depending on who is. Dan, is your hand still up, or you have something else you want to say?
My bad.
Okay, I just happened to look back up at the screen. I was like, did I miss something? Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so depending on what your kind of every team of skipper and crew might have a different decision on who's going to be the primary tactician sort of person. It may be the skipper, since they're saying I'm already looking around anyway, or maybe it's the crew, since they have a little more freedom to look around everywhere around the boat. So you'll see differing opinions on how that should actually work out. So it kind of just comes down to what your particular pairing works best as. Probably at a lot of lower levels, the skipper ends up being the tactician, because in JV maybe the crew is kind of still along for the ride, they're still learning stuff, but certainly as you get up to the higher levels of racing, it really could be either person. So yeah, making sure we have everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, and then after every race that you sail, kind of reconstruct it with everybody on your boat, which for us is 2 people. But kind of play back what went right, what went wrong, what lessons can we take away from it, especially in a high school regatta. That's the sort of thing we can learn right away, and we're going right into the next race. So if we can take something quick away from it that improves that race right away, that's pretty neat. And maybe there's more general things as well. Maybe we figured out some new solution to a mark room issue or something like that. Or maybe we realize we don't know a solution to a particular mark room issue, and so we're going to go back to shore and ask the coach about it, or ask our other team members about it, see if they've seen it before and what's the best way to deal with that. But kind of replay what you did, so that you can learn from it and figure it out. that's what, remember earlier in the season, we kind of talked about having like a regatta notebook or a sailing notebook, right? So this is the sort of stuff that, you go back on the land after your 2 races every rotation, and you can kind of write down, whatever it was. We figured out that this is a way to solve this particular difficulty we've been having, or whoa, like accelerations off the starting line really clicked. This is what I have to do for that, that sort of thing. Cool. So that was the strategy section, I'll call it. And then we have the tactics section that I pulled out. A couple of things here. So they're kind of all over the board. There's a bunch of not extremely related things, but we'll just run right through them one at a time. So first one, wait 2 boat lengths before you tack or jibe in a puff or a shift to make sure you're completely in the new wind pattern, right? So if we kind of imagine that, this is our puff. It's on the water somewhere. It's obviously not over the entire water. So if we are sailing along and we hit this puff, or maybe it's a wind shift, right? Maybe we realize that we can head up higher here as we get into it. If we realize, or it's a header, and we want to tack on it. So if we realize that's something we want to do, we want to make sure that we get fully into the new wind pattern, right? So if we just barely hit it right here and we're like, oh, that's a header, got to tack. It's possible that we could tack out of it, and then we tack for nothing because we're no longer in whatever's going on here. Or in a puff, the puff is one spot on the water. So if we see, oh, right here, here's where the ripples begin. Here's where the cat's paws begin. I've just hit it with my bow. It's just touching my boat. I know this is when I want to tack. I have a little more power to tack, and I tack out of the puff. And so we want to make sure that we don't do that. We want to make sure we get fully into that wind. So we're gonna sail a couple of boat lengths in, and then we'll tack, because we know we're actually in whatever it is, that puff or that shift, and we're in it for good. So that's one. Next one is, if you are coming up to the windward mark, try to overshoot it by maybe half a boat length. Not a lot, but don't aim to be right there on the buoy, perfectly at close haul, because if you did misjudge it and end up a little low, you're gonna have a bad time, right? So instead of trying to judge it perfectly, we're gonna leave ourselves a little room. So for us, half a boat length is like 6 feet, which is not an enormous amount of distance, right? So it gives you a lot of leeway for, if you did misjudge a little bit, or if there's current pushing you down, or if there's waves that are pushing you down, or if there's another boat that's sitting on top of you and not letting you sail as high as you would have liked to. There's a bunch of different things that could result in us not getting exactly to where we wanted to be. So we've got that little bit of leeway, then that'll work out a little better for us. The other benefit is that if we come in, with that kind of half boat length leeway there, it's now we have our wide and tight rounding, just like we talk about at a leeward mark, right? So instead of coming right up to this mark and then having to kind of pinwheel around it, we're able to have a little distance, and as we get to it, now we're able to ease off, reach down a little bit to that mark, start letting our sails out, and we're picking up a lot of speed, and we don't have to do that super sharp turn as we come around the mark. So a couple different reasons why we can try to just overshoot a little bit onto that starboard tack ley line coming in. Another random tactical thought. Observe your competition to kind of get a quick understanding of your boat's relative performance. So whether it's right off the starting line or wherever we're kind of in a group of boats going somewhere, take a minute and think about, are we faster than everybody else? In which case, that's pretty cool. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Are we a little slower than everybody else? In which case, let's see if we can figure out, make a change. See if we can figure out what we're doing that's making us go slower. Is our sail trim not set up right? Are we at the wrong angle? So kind of looking at the boats around us to see Are we doing what we should be doing, or do we need to fix something? Next up, are we sailing in clear air? Clear lanes make gains, said Audrey Comerford in 2019. But yes, disturbed wind or water will slow you down. So when you have the opportunity, get out of that situation if you can. Obviously, sometimes it's just chop everywhere, like Annapolis. Sometimes there's just no wind everywhere. But there are certainly plenty of situations where we find ourselves sailing underneath somebody and we realize, if I'm the yellow boat, I have no reason really to be sailing there. If it's right after the start, maybe there's not much we can do. There's plenty of situations where we have to put up with it for a little bit of time. But certainly if there is an opportunity to get out of that bad situation, always be looking for, is there somewhere better we could be? Now going downwind. Be the first boat to jibe on a lift. So what does that mean? Lifts and headers are kind of, you have to kind of think backwards about them going downwind, right? They're really easy to understand if we're upwind. So sailing close hauled, here we've got our angle. And then if the wind shifts this direction, that's a header, right? It means that we cannot keep sailing at this angle. The wind is coming closer to our bow, so we have to head down, and that's what a header does to us. Vice versa, if we have a lift, that means the wind has gone toward the back of our boat. It allows us to head further up, right? Because the mark doesn't change with the wind. So if we get a lift, it means we're able to point up closer to the mark. Going downwind, it's a little different. Downwind, the header is what helps us, right? Because we're still defining the header as the wind is moving more toward the bow of your boat, right? So that means in this case, instead of doing this, the wind is going like this. So it is going further toward the bow. But if you look at that from when we're sailing downwind, that means we head down more. Just like when we're sailing upwind, the same thing is happening. Our boat is heading down. But when we're sailing downwind, that's what we want to be doing, right? So when we get a header, it means we're sailing down, we're sailing closer to that mark. That helps us. When we have a lift, remember the lift is the wind is moving toward the back of the boat. It lets the boat head up, or it makes the boat head up, depending on how you want to put that. So going downwind, that means that our angle that used to be like this now has to be like this, right? And so that's making us go a longer distance to the mark. Even if we're on wing on wing, that's still going to affect us a little bit. So the lift is what is going to not be so good for us going downwind. So when you get a big enough lift that it's not just a few degrees, it's actually, we are heading up something like this, we want to make sure that we jibe on it so that now if one tack is lifted, the other tack was headed. So we want to get onto the headed tack if we're going downwind. And typically the first boat that does that is able to make a lot of gain on all the other boats. Doesn't mean they're going to pass all the other boats, but they're going to get a lot closer to the mark a lot faster than those other boats do. So that's probably one of the bigger ways you can start passing people on downwinds is watching for when these shifts come and reacting to them. So moving back up to one of the last couple things, we've got we said wait a little while before we get into that shift, like make sure it's going to stick around, and then as soon as we realize we're in it, it's definitely that lift going on. So let's go ahead and jibe real quick. And it looks like Dan's got a hand up. So let's see what he's got.
Hey, it's something that would be really awesomely explained with a visual, and your video is kind of cutting out for me, so I don't know if you covered this. But I'll select the upwind. When you get a lift, you keep it, and when you get a header, if you're the first attack on it and you get it and nobody else does, it helps you big.
Mm-hmm.
But even more so, what I think Gary Jobson is saying on the downwind is on that when you don't get on the upwind is if you're the last one to jibe over on a header or a lift, or just a lift. If you're the last one to jibe over on a lift, because you're drawing from where those boats are, you end up with a succession of boats that are covering your air. So you lose much larger than if you miss a lift going upwind, or if you miss a header going upwind than if you miss a header or a lift going downwind. Especially in the light breeze, when you're drawing air from so far in front of you, if there happens to be a set of boats on that breeze, like, you're done for. But also in the bigger breeze, if they can get any inkling, that's like the only chance they have to pass you, and you just gave it to them.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So basically what Dan's saying is, and we'll see if I can get the visual going on here. If we do have the situation where we've got a lift, right? So it means the wind is going toward the back of the boats, toward their stern. So everybody jives on it. And if we're the green boat and we let everybody jibe, then now, this guy is here and this guy is here. So let me not knock my whiteboard over. If we don't get out and jibe on that lift real soon, suddenly we realize that everybody is already coming over to this side and we've got no chance to get clean air. Whereas if we're one of the first people to jibe on that lift, boom, we're able to move out and we've got clean air. Even when these people start coming back over this way, we've started moving out and we've got more of a chance to keep our air clean, have our own lane. So hopefully that was able to go through there. All right, cool. So that's that guy. Then next one, when it's light wind or we've got our speed is slow for whatever reason, everybody kind of sit still, try not to move around, and stay quiet so that everybody can kind of focus on the performance of the boat and getting it back moving. That's probably one of the ones that's a little more relevant to bigger keel boats, because when there's 8 people on board, typically there's a lot of talking going back and forth. So when it gets light and we really need to sit and focus on exactly what we're doing, you can usually do that a little better when you're not trying to tune out a lot of chatter around you. But certainly trying not to move around more than is necessary. It's definitely gonna the more the kind of the sails are like shaking around, the less efficient they're gonna be at picking up those little tiny puffs from the real light wind stuff. And the last one in the tactics group that I broke out is, anytime you're slow, recognize that fact as soon as possible and react to it as fast as possible. Because obviously the more time we spend slower than other people, the more time they spend getting further ahead of us. Cool. So, and that was kind of like, there's kind of in two categories. Because I'll put it up here with sail trim. Your first reaction when you realize you're slow is that you should ease your sails a little bit, especially if you realize that we've just been kind of sitting, like cranking the sail in, especially if we're newer sailors. We say when you're going upwind, pull the sails all the way in. And so if you've literally got the sails pulled all the way in, there's certainly plenty of conditions where that won't actually work for you, and you have to start learning the different times when that is or is not relevant. But certainly, first, whenever you realize you're going slower than you think you should, the first and easiest adjustment to make is try easing your sails out, and that'll usually help a lot. And if it doesn't change anything, then that probably wasn't it. We'll try something new. But that's the first and easiest adjustment to try to make there. Next up for sail trim. And again, a lot of this stuff we've probably kind of gone over to some extent recently in the last couple of talks we had, but they're worth bringing up again. So whenever you bear off or head away from the wind, ease your sails out at the same time you do that, because that's how your boat picks up speed. If you don't do that, you will not accelerate. You will actually start slowing down because now your sails are over trimmed. They're pulled in too far. So we talked through that, I think last Wednesday, a week ago, if anybody was there, the one when I was at the trailer. But we kind of talked about how you've got to have, the right angle, the wind onto the sails. So if we were sailing close hauled and had our sails in, and then we start heading down, maybe we're going around a windward mark. If we don't ease those sails out as we do that, then this angle that the wind is hitting the sails becomes steeper and steeper and starts to stall out. We don't have that flow over the sails anymore. So we just have to make sure that we ease those sails out. Make sure basically the sails are at the same angle to the wind all the time. Is kind of how you can think of that. Next up, this goes into our ease hike trim. In a gust, you ease the sails before trying to turn the rudder. So we're watching ahead to see those puffs coming so that we can kind of act to the puff instead of reacting to something that's already happening. But basically just that ease hike trim deal ease hike go straight trim that we talked about the other day. We don't want to turn because that turning is going to slow that boat a little bit. So instead we're going to ease those sails because that apparent wind moves back, and also it's kind of heeling us over. What do we got? Next up, telltales. So you want to check on your jib. Are your telltales breaking evenly? And by breaking, what he means is just when they start to, flap around, go crazy on you, right? So when we've got our jib up here, most of the time, unless you've got a real old jib that all the telltales have been ripped off, you'll notice that you've got, do I have a red marker? I have an orange marker. You've got multiple sets of telltales, right? You might have a couple different ones up here, but then there's usually 2 or maybe even 3 sets of telltales, obviously on both sides, right? I think our FJ jibs just have 2 sets, if I remember correctly. So one on each side. And so he's saying you want to be looking at the telltales up here and up here. They want to be doing pretty much the same thing. So if the ones up top, if they are breaking first or fluttering first, what is, my zoom went away. No, it's still here. Something came up. There we go. If the ones up top are breaking or fluttering first, then it means that the back edge, the leech of the jib is a little looser, right? So then we want to move our jib lead farther forward. If we're in FJ, we've got our little blocking pulley right there. So we move that a little farther forward so that it pulls down the direction that your jib sheet pulls is pulling it farther down to keep this leech a little tighter, and that's going to help them. It's going to help them match up again. If the bottom is breaking first, then we want to move that jib lead back because it means that the foot of the jib is looser. That's the right word. The foot of the jib is looser, and so the bottom portion of the jib is starting to luff first. So that's how we can kind of balance that, and that's basically what we're thinking of when we say further forward for lighter wind and further back for heavy winds. If we're pulling that jib further back, we're pulling that foot of that sail flatter. We're letting this open up a little bit more. But for this is something that'll help us with any conditions, figuring out exactly where the jib leads want to be, is try to match up those telltales. And then for the mainsail, we've got telltales, or we should have telltales. They're probably the ones that are more likely to get ripped off because when you lay it on the ground to roll it, they're all sticking off the back of the sail and they're laying directly on the ground. But as long as we have mainsail telltales, the one we really, really care about is right up top, like right off the top batten of the sail. So depending on which boat you have, you're looking at a little different things. The 420 telltale wants to be basically, streaming smoothly. and maybe going around the back of the sail a little bit, kind of evenly, stream it out, sometimes folding around the back. That's what the mainsail telltale does when it's basically luffing, right? So your jib telltales flap around, the mainsail telltale folds around the back of the sail. The FJ, you want that mainsail telltale stalled like 80% of the time, wrapped around the back of the sail, because the FJ is a pointing machine and we just want to crank that mainsail in and head upwind. The 420 is more about keeping up, where it's that VMG, that balance between pointing and getting boat speed is more important. So we have to keep that main a little happier. But the FJ, certainly we can just crank it in and we're folding that telltale around the back of the main like 80% of the time. So yeah, telltales are quite important to us on sails. And then also make sure we're setting up our sail with the correct shape. So especially the mainsail, I guess, moving all these jib leads, that's your jib shape. And we unfortunately don't have a lot of that ability in the 420, but certainly in the FJ, this is how we fix the jib shape. For the mainsail, we're looking at the draft in the sail, right? And that is, if I give myself a little more space to draw here. So here's our boom and our sail looking straight down from the top of the mast, right? Our sail doesn't go right along the boom unless we really crank that outhaul in, but it looks something like this. And somewhere around in here is going to be the maximum depth that we have, right? The maximum draft. So it could be, if we have a shape more like that, you can kind of see there's your maximum draft. So somewhere between 40% and 50% back from the mast is where you want the maximum draft to be basically all the time. We can adjust that a little bit. If we want to point higher, we'll pull the draft aft toward the back of the boat. If we want more speed or more power, we can let the draft go forward. And basically, we've got all these controls. We've got the outhaul, we've got the downhaul, we've got the vang. Basically, the draft is going to move in the direction that you're putting tension on the sail. So if we think about when we tighten the outhaul, right? The outhaul is pulling from the very back corner of the sail, the clew of the mainsail. So that's where the tension is in the sail. That's going to move the draft back. If we pull on the downhaul, where all that tension is right up in the front of the sail, right up against the mast, along the luff, right? So that's going to move the draft toward that tension. It's going to move the draft forward. If you put on more boom vang, right, we can imagine it's not directly touching the sail, but if we think about where it's pulling on, it's pulling the boom down, which is going to be again pulling on that back edge corner, that clew of the sail. So that's going to be starting to move our draft back as well. So yeah, basically draft goes back if we want more power. Draft goes forward, or sorry, back up. Draft goes back when we want to point better. Draft goes forward when we want more power. We want more fullness in our sail up here when we need more power, more speed. So sail setup, very important, whether it's telltales or figuring out the right amount of draft we need. That's big for us too. And then the last one there is, when you're making a lot of changes like this, do one adjustment at a time. Don't tighten if you think you need more power, don't loosen your outhaul and loosen your vang, and then wonder which one it was that actually did it. Take one variable at a time, make it like a science experiment, and ease off the outhaul and see, is that giving me a little more power? Am I going a little faster, or did I maybe let it off too much and it's not actually doing anything for me? And then figure that out. And then, all right, well, I'm still trying to go a little faster. That outhaul worked, but maybe we want a little more power. So maybe I have too much vang on. So now I can try the vang. But if you do a bunch of stuff at once, you don't know whether all of them worked, or if one of them worked, or if none of them worked. Right. So kind of as you're experimenting around with everything, figure out which is one at a time, so that you can figure out what's doing what. It looks like I have like 2 minutes. So if y'all want to stick around, I will end this meeting and restart it again. And that way we can keep talking and not have to leave immediately. So let me do that rather than get suddenly cut off in the middle of a sentence. I'll just restart. So everybody stay there and it should just bring you right back in.